All IT Leadership Community Webinar. We are going to go an hour or a little longer tonight, depending on how many questions there are from the audience. Just a quick reminder on housekeeping. We ask, well, all attendees are muted by default. If you have questions, you can ask them in the Q&A bar at the bottom of your screen. You can hover over that, or in the chat window. Karen Ianta from Expedient is helping us with that this afternoon and with the polling. We will have links for the recording after the webinar. You can actually see the first installment of this on the Expedient YouTube channel. You can look it up. And the answers to the polls that we will do with the audience are anonymous. So let me introduce our panelists. First of all, I am your host, Doug Theis, founder of IT Leaders and the Director of Market Strategy with Expedient. Jeff, would you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. I'm Jeff Tunn. I'm the founder of the Indy CIO Network. Glad that everybody could make it tonight. Looking forward to the conversation with our panelists.
All right. Again, our agenda is a combination of an anonymous audience poll questions and questions for the panelists on strategy and tactics based on questions that people requested at the last session and questions posed by the CIOs involved. You, the audience, will be able to ask questions at the end of the session. And if you're interested in posting anything about this on social media, we'd request that you maybe take some screenshots and send them to me or to Jeff Tunn. And you can use the hashtags ITLeadersIndy and Indy CIO Network. Let me introduce the panelists to you. We've got Jeff Dodson, CIO of UnitedHealthOne. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, everybody.
We've got Nirav Shah of Republic Airline. Nirav?
Good evening, everyone.
We've got Glenn Keller, Director of IT from Countrymark. Welcome, Glenn.
Hello, everyone.
Laura Larimer, IT Officer for Indianapolis Public Schools. And Jay Lytle, CIO of Goodwill of Central and Southern Indiana. Welcome, Jay.
Hello.
All right, we are going to start with a poll here. Let me share my screen again. Karen, can we bring up poll question 1? Yeah, there we go. Audience, how much of your IT team's work has changed for 2020 because of COVID-19? We've got a few gradations here. Give you 15 seconds to answer. All right, I'm going to end the polling. And it looks like somewhere between 25 and 50% was the answer that was most common. Laura, how would you rate this?
I got to say that mine is closer to the 100% mark. It is definitely somewhere between 75% and 100%.
Wow.
As a school district, we are completely reinventing our business. So that means a complete change in what we do as an IT support organization. Now, obviously, we're still doing all the normal stuff, right? We still have to do the patches and the break fix, but how we do that and exactly what the processes are and exactly what the messaging to our customers is changing very literally on a daily basis.
Wow, what a challenge. Jay Lytle, how about you?
Yeah, so, if you look at this through the lens of you're on December 31st of 2020 and you look back and say, what did you accomplish and how did that look different from the beginning of the year? I think we would be in the 25 to 50%, but kind of like Laura said, the how you do it, how you accomplish it is going to look more like 75% change. We still have a lot of the same priorities. We have a lot of the same demands, but the method in which we are getting things done has changed, and I don't know that it'll go back anytime in the near future. So,
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. I'm going to knock this poll off the screen and let's switch over to our first panelist question. Jeff?
All right, panel. Somewhat related to how things have changed, what strategic initiatives will you likely have to revisit or reprioritize as a result of COVID-19? And Glenn, we're going to start with you on that.
Glenn, are you muted?
I'm no longer muted. I think, hey, somebody had to be the first.
So Glenn, we're going to start with you on that.
So I think the key here is strategic. Our company's mission remains the same. Our long-term goals remain the same. We're a gas and oil company. We're not gonna pivot to healthcare or the airline business or anything like that. So when you look at our long-term things, nothing's changing. There are some business centric priorities that have been delayed a little bit, but like we have $50 million refinery investment coming up in 2021, and that is still going. That's still going full bore. We're not planning on changing any of that. From an IT standpoint, I kind of a funny discussion with my boss because I laid out, well, we got this $5 million ERP project going on. We got $500,000 we're spending on data architecture, another, like $750,000 on this and that. And she just kind of looked at me. She's the CFO. She said, Glenn, you're just keep going. Your projects are like chump change. So, and the important thing is, $5 million is not chump change, in most organizations, including ours. But I think her point was, hey, you've positioned these as important for the company's future. These don't look like good candidates for short-term cuts. So while we're looking at some things to save money in the short term, there's nothing major that is in our strategy pipeline that we're really delaying at this point, because we feel like we're going to come out of this, people are going to start traveling again, and people are going to buy gasoline and diesel.
Nirav, I'd love your perspective on this and what you're seeing at Republic as far as revisiting or reprioritizing your initiatives.
Absolutely. First of all, I'm happy that Glenn's not getting into the airline industry. So thanks for that, Glenn. And I can tell you it's not a time to get in that industry either. So, but it's a kind of a trick question for me, because personally speaking, I do not like the word reprioritize or revisit, because I don't feel that COVID forced us to do any of that. I feel like if at the beginning of the year, if you had the right strategy, COVID just reinforces the strategy. So, things that Glenn said, things that others said is very similar for us as well. As much as, we talk about the impact the airline industry is currently going through with around 5 to 10% of flying, there is a strong belief that we are going to come out of this very, very successfully. We are all going to be coming out of this on the other side. And the technology projects are the one that is really going to help us not only navigate the storm, but even position us for a much bigger and a long-term success. So we aren't per se slowing down on any of those initiatives. Our approach to get there, might have changed. The economic sides of, capital investments might have changed, but, things like digital transformation, if the company had a strategy at the beginning of this year to either continue on that path, continue on the journey, or stop or start digital transformation, I think COVID just reinforces that, hey, that was the right strategy to begin with. I think similarly on the data and analytics side, we are going to start seeing more and more companies want to start making faster and better decisions. So we are continuing our investment on data and analytics platform as well. Around a year or a half ago, we started a robotics program, and we deployed close to around 30 to 40 bots right now that does a lot of operational efficiency work for us. And that program has just exponentially grown over the last 2 months. as a result of COVID-19. So definitely continued investment there. Security is the only one I would probably feel that it not only reinforces, but there is more awareness around, because we now have our network at 1,000+ homes rather than at, in one headquarter, a couple of locations. So what are we doing from managing remote workplaces? What are we doing from incident response team? Have we ever tried an incident response from a remote locations? So security is getting more attention, and rightly so. You go into learning and development. I think usually when you're in a situation like we are right now, the first thing people look from a budget perspective is learning and development, and freezing some of that. And I believe that's, in my personal opinion, that's a big mistake. Because learning and development is an investment for the future. It's not for today. And we all know we are going to be on the other side, and we all can see the light at the end of the tunnel than we last talked 4 weeks ago. So it's better we continue our investment there and start preparing ourselves to get out of that. As the saying is, and I've said this so many times to my team, never let a crisis go waste. And if we do not grow, and if we do not challenge ourselves, and if we do not learn through this process, I think we let the crisis go waste.
I think that's a great perspective for all of us. Thank you for that. Laura, what initiatives have you had to revisit or reprioritize as a result?
I think that's a great question, Jeff. And when I first started thinking about this, my first response was, we're rethinking everything. That there is no strategic priority that was there prior to COVID that's still here. And then as I thought about it more, that's really not quite true. It's just that the lens has changed. So let me see if I can explain a little bit more from a K-12 education perspective. So in K-12, we were kind of slowly, school by school, getting to one-to-one and doing e-learning. Well, COVID definitely accelerated that. But teacher professional development and all staff professional development has always been a strategic priority. We've just pivoted to see that through a lens of the acceleration to e-learning one-to-one for every student in our district. And that's really true across all of those things, to make sure that we've got the right supports for kids who might be first-time English language learners, to make sure we've got the right supports for kids who may have learning disabilities, whether those are physical, emotional, or cognitive. We now have to view that through a lens of what does that look like when we are delivering that through a technology supported delivery system versus an in-classroom delivery system. And we know that we're going to have to continue to do that through the rest of this school year. And we don't know what next school year is going to look like. So in some ways I can say we've revisited and reprioritized absolutely every strategic thing. But in other ways, I think the better answer really is we're just seeing all those things that are important and just viewing them through this new lens of a completely new delivery system for the district, and that is certainly impacting my team.
Excellent. Thanks, Laura. Back to you, Doug. We might have lost Doug.
Uh-oh.
Was that Pilates class he was talking about? Karen, can you bring up panelist question 2?
The poll question?
Oh, sorry, the poll question, yes.
Here we go. So Jeff, if you want to read that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is your IT team's strategic versus tactical workload ratio?
I'll give it a few more seconds here. Okay, I'm going to end the polling and share the results.
Excellent. Looks like the high water mark is about 50-50 for folks. And so I'm going to ask the panelists who was going to respond to this particular poll question, because I don't have Doug's notes.
So I think this poll question was question number 3. And I think it's me and Shaw and Lytle.
Actually, it's poll question number 2.
Oh, it is. Okay. I'm sorry. I mean, it's panelist question number 3. But maybe I'm wrong. I may be wrong.
Oh, there it is. I got it. So it's we're going to have Glenn and then Nirav respond to audience poll 2. So Glenn, you first.
Yeah, I would say we fall into that 50-50, and I had the benefit with the other panelists of seeing this ahead of time. And so it really kind of surprised me when I really thought it through, because I would say a couple of years ago, we were probably 10% strategic and 90% tactical. So that will persist before, during, and after this crisis.
I can take this. So I think Jeff, right before this, there was actually a question that Laura, myself, and Jay were going to be answering, and that takes us to this poll question. So that question was more about how is your mix of strategic work, which is business projects, internal IT improvements projects, versus the tactical project, planned upgrades, patching, unplanned emergencies. That's changing. So I think the poll question was kind of leading us. This question was leading us to the poll.
I think you're
so I'll try to
right,
combine those two. Yeah, so I'll try to combine those two answers together, and I think if I was answering to the poll, I would have said 50-50. So over the last 18 months for us, we were definitely more of a 60% around strategic projects, moving us to the future, and around 40% to keeping the lights on, okay? However, what COVID did to us was something unique in our industry. So, we are a 24/7 business. Most of the time we have one or the other flight that's flying late into the West Coast. So it's late night for us over here. And then we have an early morning flight that's taking off from LaGuardia. So we are back on the East Coast time, right? So our maintenance window for us was maybe an hour. If we were lucky, it will probably go to 2 hours. There is always a storm in some part of America. There is always something going on. So we are always, there's a delay or something like that, right? So our maintenance window was a couple of hours. So anytime we have to do a maintenance or keeping the lights on initiative, it requires a lot of planning, but the timing is all dependent on weather gods. So for us, this has kind of opened up that window as much as, like I said earlier, never let a crisis go waste. So all of a sudden our window is now 5 hours, 6 hours, because we aren't flying that much. We aren't flying that late into the night. Some of our routes have been cut. So we have intentionally pivoted more towards, I would say, 45% on the opportunity and 55% on keeping lights on. So since that wasn't the option on the poll, I would probably stick with 50-50. Now, I do understand that's going to be different from every industry. For us, it was just the opportunity window that we found to say, let's take care of a lot of the things, whether it's old server, whether it's security patching, whether it's upgrades. Let's get all that stuff right now, when our maintenance window miraculously went from 2 hours to 6 hours.
Excellent, thank you. Hey, Glenn, let's do back up, and we'll tackle panelist question 2, which is, which IT and business processes will likely change as a result of COVID, and which won't?
Okay. Well, part of this is a little bit of projection and prognostication, I guess, right? Because we're still evolving in this space. So for me, when I look across our organization, we are right now, our organization is probably about half of our employees are already mobile. That doesn't mean they're working quote unquote remotely out of their houses, but they're mobile. So they carry mobile devices to do their job. So they're not really coming into the refinery or into terminals or to pipeline locations or anything like that. I think that's going to accelerate by the end of this year. Probably about 3/4 of our employees will be operating that way. That's because most of our employees are hands-on employees out in the field. The other thing that I'm going to say is probably going forward, if it's an IT solution, so if it's a technical solution or a process and it can't be done remotely, I think it's a non-starter. I think everybody has to look at that. Like, I know we have some things that make it difficult, right? So I don't want to name the technologies, but they probably have to go. So those are some of the things we're looking at. And then the other thing too is we've just instituted we're bringing the first people back to the office on the 11th of May in our Mount Vernon location. And so we're having all employees do self screenings at home, right? So we've given them a guide. They're supposed to take their temperatures at home. We're giving them all the same thermometers to use, and they're going to go through this checklist. I mean, that's just screaming for a technical solution, right? So here, click the box if you've passed all these things. So I don't know when that goes away. So I'm not sure when it becomes okay to say, okay, well, from now on, if you have a temperature, come on in. So I think that's potentially game changing, and it forces all kinds of HR issues. Like, are people actually sick, as in you have to take a sick day if they pass that, if they fail that test, et cetera. So.
Excellent. Hey, Jeff Dodson, let's hear from you. Which IT and business processes will likely change as a result of COVID, and which won't?
Well, let's talk about the things that I see changing, and most of this would be things that we've learned over the last 2 months or so. And I think the company proved that they can move faster without some of the traditional heavyweight governance practices. And I would even say what's traditional around Agile. So even Agile went faster. So I'm really looking forward to leaning out. And when I say heavyweight governance practices, you have no idea what it's like to try to get stuff going here. So I'm really thrilled that I think that stuff, because they were able to pivot so quickly in so many places to serve the market in the COVID crisis, I think we'll see some of those change. I think we're also going to see a permanent reverse of the trend of insisting on physical co-location of Agile teams. We haven't missed a beat on delivery. Even with squeezing in the COVID changes to benefits plans and things like that, we just haven't missed a beat. So I think the gig is up on being physically co-located on Agile teams. From a business perspective, I think we're going to see a clear increase in investment on virtual selling platforms for agents. So while we're also investing heavily in DTC to try to sell without agents, agents are still a huge part of the health insurance business and probably always will be. But they're used to a face-to-face relationship with their customers, and this eliminated that essentially. So I expect to see increasing investments in virtual selling platforms that would not only be used by those field agents, but perhaps even folks in our call center. I think that since not only has IT not missed a beat, the business hasn't missed a beat either. And in some cases, we're seeing better customer service, shorter queue times, shorter call times, less manual handling of claims. So I think that there's going to be a permanent change in what jobs sit in the building and what jobs don't. And I think that probably what's a real benefit for UnitedHealthOne, which is the individual business inside UnitedHealthcare, with the 30 million unemployed people, there's a renewed interest at the corporate. So we've always been a rounding error to the enterprise. I mean, while I don't think UnitedHealthOne's a small business, to UnitedHealthcare, it's a rounding error. But I think they're seeing a strategic value now for the individual market to play on the same field with them. And they're really concerned about, they see people shifting between different elements of UnitedHealthcare over their lifetime. And I think we're going to see a permanent renewed interest in the individual market. And definitely what doesn't change is our mission.
Excellent. Hey, thanks, Jeff. And Doug, welcome back. Glad you could join us again. I went ahead and obviously we were on question 2. So do you want to take question 3?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. How is your mix of strategic work, your business projects, and your internal IT improvement projects versus your tactical work like planned upgrades and patching and unplanned emergencies? How are those two categories changing? Laura, let's start with you.
Helps if I unmute myself before I start talking, don't you think?
Thank you.
I spoke on the first question about how we really are completely reinventing how we deliver education at IPS. And so I think it's kind of easy for me to say that things have really moved to the strategic. But again, as I reflected on this, that's kind of me and my direct reports. And I have an organization that's a whole lot bigger than that. And so those folks that really are the boots on the ground that keep operations running all the time are still doing the same things that they've always done in order to keep those operations safe and secure and available and reliable and redundant for everybody who needs to use them. And so while I feel this huge shift on my own more to the strategic, I think that's more a matter of, at least in small and medium-sized organizations, leaders in IT kind of have their foot in both of those arenas, right? You've got one foot in keeping the lights on and another foot in what's the strategy. So for me, I'm balanced over a little more on that strategy side personally today, but I think my folks would say, well, we're just going to keep on doing what we do until you tell us to do something different. And so I'm pretty happy with that because I'm really glad that the wheels are staying on that yellow bus, excuse the pun, because we need that. We need that so that all of the people who are relying on the services that we deliver day in and day out can feel safe and secure, at least that they can get on the network, that they can reach the applications they need to reach, that they can do the business that they need to do. And then there are these handful of us who are more off on the strategic side, trying to figure out what's going to change and what we're going to tell those folks that are keeping the lights on they need to do differently tomorrow than what they do today.
Thank you, Laura. Nirav, how about you?
Yeah, so Doug, I think this is the one I answered right before you joined back. So I did answer this question. However, if, just since you opened the mic for me, I'm not going to give up on that opportunity. And I would like to actually, answer the question number 2, because I was very impressed with what Jeff said. I've said that over years that a lot of people use size as an excuse. And as Jeff said at the beginning, I think what he's noticing at his organization is so common that irrespective of the size, the agility, the quicker response, the ability to produce at a lot faster pace has resulted as a big shift due to COVID. So, the question was about what will change and what would not change. And I actually like what Jeff said, because that was exactly on my list as well, which was more about agility. And when I say that, I don't mean agility as an agile framework or a manifesto. I meant that more of a verb. The industries, the organizations that were supposed to manufacture cars were manufacturing ventilators few weeks ago. So if anybody said that they had established Six Sigma certified processes, within days, if not hours, they changed their processes and they were able to adapt. So that's going to be the key as we all come out of this. I feel remote workplace management and offices. So I don't know how much investment our company is going to continue making into real estate, considering how expensive they are as compared to technology that will allow us to be remote and still function at the highest productivity level. I feel one thing that we haven't mentioned is business continuity, right? So a year ago or a year and a half ago, if I was invited to a meeting to talk about a potential pandemic and preparedness for business continuity, either I would have not gone to the meeting or I would have taken my laptop and done something else, right? At this point, if somebody is going to make that invitation, I think they'll get 100% attention of everyone that's on that invite list and many others. So the business continuity practice in every organization is going to get the much needed attention that it always deserved. One thing I would say from coaching and training perspective, I think what's going to change is leadership training. I think you're going to start seeing a lot of focus on the leadership training around trust, because you don't have to see your people around you to believe that they are working, right? Industries that thought that working at home is never possible are an industry, and us included, have proven in the last 2 months that it is very much possible. So I feel like a lot of those would change, and that technology has a big role to play there. From an airline, from a business perspective, I know there is temporary restrictions around social distancing or requirement around wearing masks on the flights. I believe that's going to be a temporary only. But what I'm interested to see is, and I hope it stays, would be a long-term regulation around advanced cleaning. So over the last 2 months, we are doing a very heavy advanced cleaning in each of our plane, and I hope that continues to stay. And then similar to what happened after 9/11, where the entire travel industry at TSA had a lot of restrictions and a lot of changes, I believe this is going to result in some of those. So I'm not sure, when we go to the airport and stand in those thermal screening, I would assume that they would start taking our body temperatures at this point. And depending on what that is, there might be some advanced testing that happens before you are allowed to get on the plane. So I'm curious to know what kind of changes do come in the airline industry and the TSA because of COVID. What will not change because of COVID is a tough thing for me to answer, because I have always said, and I believe that change is the only constant. So I don't think COVID is going to come and stop that. I think everything would continue to change. Every process has a room to grow, and every technology has an advancement to happen. So I apologize. I have to go back to the question number 2 since I'd already answered, but I think it was an important question, and I think I wanted to chime in on what Jeff said. So agility is going to be key. Mute.
Jay Lytle, how about you? How is your mix changing?
I think the percentage mix between strategic work and tactical hasn't changed that much. If you look within those buckets, it's changed a lot. So that's kind of where it's gone. So for instance, with tactical, our corporate office has been mostly shut down. And, when we have, 2 schools run out of there, all of the support departments, most of the nurses operating out of that facility, the opportunity to, what can we get done during this period of shutdown? We did take advantage of that, and some items that we had on our to-do list for later this year and even into next year, we expedited and cranked it out while the office was empty. The same is true for our stores. With the stores being closed, we were able to swap out a number of contracts, particularly telecommunication contracts, and operate them on 4G for a period of time to, on the backside have faster speeds at reduced costs. So we took advantage of that. Again, things on our to-do list, but we could get it done very quickly. That said, looking at strategic work, we've, we were going to launch a new reward system, and you don't have any customers, that's probably not the right time to launch a reward system. So that clearly got delayed, but something, we moved forward was some e-commerce initiatives, which we would have loved to have had done this time last year, but those have gained priority. So I think when I look at the work that's being done, the new priorities, the the difference between strategic and tactical is about the same, but they're different from what's being done.
Thank you very much, Jay. All right, we have done this poll, correct?
Yep.
All right, go ahead, Jeff.
Awesome. And thanks. I think we're now on track. I now have real empathy for the newscaster when the teleprompter goes out. So let's jump into question 4. We're going to shift gears just a little bit and open up our crystal ball even more. And the question is, how is your long-term strategy changing or evolving due to COVID? So Glenn, let's toss back to you. Your long-term strategy, what's the impact on it?
Yeah, I think, just kind of aligning, starting with business strategy, because hopefully that's how everybody's aligned. The strategy for us looks the same longer term. We're seeing gradual over time destruction in gasoline demand, a little bit slower destruction in diesel demand, and that's a long-term trend no matter what. So what has happened with this kind of black swan event is, gasoline demand, diesel demand hasn't changed that much, but gasoline demand is like, I mean, it's gone through the floor, right? And that includes like, Nirav's business, like jet fuel and all that stuff is, it's just not being consumed, and it's all the way down to you driving to work. So we're kind of seeing what it looks like when there's very little gasoline demand. We expect that to come back up, but we kind of see this as a crystal ball in the future anyway. So our really long-term strategy doesn't change that much. I think it's going to get tweaked a little bit in that I think you're going to see boards asking more questions about, hey, what's your pandemic responsiveness like? How are you prepared for this, right? Because I think everybody's going to be more sensitive to this in the future. I did hear, so this may go into like my strategy deck right along with the 2 other things I have in there, which happen to be cyber and data and analytics, which those are my top 2 strategy things. So this might have to go in there too. So I heard an interesting term, and I don't know who to credit it to, but it was called pandemic resistant enterprise. So I think that's something, and it might not come up like that, but I think you're going to hear the consulting business jumping on things like that. Hey, are you guys ready for this? It's going to happen again. And I think somebody, I think it was Nirav, said, hey, never waste, never waste a crisis. Well, I think, I think our friends on the consulting side of this are going to be looking to say, hey, how can we help? And one of the ways we could help is maybe bring some planning and templates to take a look at your business. And you may see it as an audit point as well, because if I'm a bank and I'm lending you money, and I see all your financials, I want to know what happens if all of a sudden the economy goes in the tank because everybody's shut down again. So I think those are some of the things I'm seeing. Those are some of the things we're looking at. But the net of what our long-term strategy isn't really going to change.
Jay, are you seeing a change or a possible change in your long-term strategy as a result of the last couple of months?
Yeah, so I think it's how you define long-term. If you go out 5 years, we're still going to be selling used apparel. We are still going to be having nurses assist first-time mothers. We're still going to be running adult high schools. So from that perspective, those core foundations of who we are is going to continue. If you look more to the midterm of, that's really where I think we see a lot of potential change. So looking at this through, Goodwill's business lens, like so many other companies, we're going to be focused on rebuilding our rainy day fund. And, so that's going to increase the required rate of return on capital projects. We're going to be favoring projects that have a faster payback period. And, inevitably what that's going to mean in the short term is likely less capital investment, right? And so we're going to see that. if you look at this from a mission perspective, we've fortunately, cross our fingers, we believe that the virus has peaked and is on the down slope. On the flip side, the hardship created by this crisis, particularly among those most affected on the lower rung of our economic spectrum, their hardship is not yet peaked. It is still climbing. And Goodwill is, in the services we provide, those are the folks and these are the times where our services are most needed. So, both Goodwill, a number of companies are looking at the data. We're consuming data as fast as we can get it to figure out where we can deploy our services and how we can deploy our services to minimize those hardships and serve as quick as possible. Again, I don't think that's necessarily long-term. I think that's short-term. But yeah, we will be changing, and we are figuring out right now what that's going to look like, particularly from a mission perspective.
Excellent. Thanks, Jay. And thanks for the dual perspective on the business and the mission side. I think that's an important perspective. Jeff Dodson, what are you guys looking at? You touched on a little bit of this earlier, but what are some of the long-term things that you see changing with your strategy?
So yeah, I touched a little bit on it before, where I think the individual market, not only serving uniquely now, I think what that's going to do is maybe the tipping point of people having their own choices to insure themselves rather than getting it all through their employer, especially those who might have better options economically on their own than what they have to contribute at their employer. In addition to that, I think this situation acted as a real catalyst for our UH1 execs to see the value of digital transformation of marketing and sales. So I mentioned the face-to-face now going virtual. There are many other components to that. But for the first time ever, these sales and marketing guys are thinking about and committing to a long-term strategy rather than the tyranny of the urgent tactical goals. We've been trying, every time we try to get in a conversation with them like that, they're always saying, well, you're not going to contribute to my sales goals this year. I'm like, yeah, but your next year and the year after that are going to tank, and it doesn't matter. But it happened. So for the first time ever, we've also got them aligned around a shared set of priorities, and they're actually questioning investments that don't support those priorities. This is like a major shift. So as Nirav and Glenn mentioned, you could say this one falls into the category of don't let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. And back to you, Doug. I think we're ready for the next audience poll, right?
We are. Karen, can you put up audience poll number 3, please? What is your estimate on how many work from home employees will continue to work from home after local stay-at-home rules ease? Give about 15 seconds here. Well, if you look at 25 and 50%, we're talking about 2/3 at the very least, and there's 18% who think 75% will stay at home. What are your thoughts on this, Laura?
Mute, Laura.
Laura, can you unmute, please?
I had pushed the button and it did not take. Thank you.
Sorry.
So I've heard a lot of people say that human beings are social creatures. And I certainly believe that that is true. And some of us more so than others. and probably those in IT less so than others. I could probably work from home for the rest of my life and be perfectly happy. But even I am finding a strong need to be a little bit more connected and a need to see other faces in something other than just a screen time. And so I think I would concur with the 25 to 50% mark of people who will work from home after the local stay-at-home rules ease. I'm not so sure that's a whole lot different than what it was prior to COVID, though. I'd be interested in knowing that number.
Yeah, great point. How about you, Jeff Dodson?
So I'm guessing it's going to be about 50%. And in my team, out of several hundred people, there's maybe 5 telecommuters today, officially. And I think between the social distancing structures that are going to have to be in place, that I'd be surprised if we occupied our building at 50%. I think it's going to be less to start with. And I do think real estate, we're going to start divesting in some real estate to make it even harder to fill them back up. But so I think that there's going to be permanent changes in how we define teams. And I mean, our Scrum teams haven't missed a beat. They're collaborating every day anyway. So 50% easy. I think it could even be closer to 2/3.
Wow. Back to you, Jeff.
All right, so Jeff, that was a great lead in. So what are the best practices for leading teams to quality collaboration during work from home? And how much of this do you see becoming the new normal? Laura, let's start with you.
So I'm going to start with, I really hope this isn't the new normal. I truly do hope this is not the new normal. I think this has been an interesting time in all of our lives. I think it's going to change how we approach our work. I don't think anything is ever going back to the way it was before, but I do believe that we are in a transition period and it's going to look different when we come out. You know, I keep saying when the vaccine is there, life is going to change again. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, we're in this sort of weird, vague, lack of clarity place that is extremely stressful at every level of an organization, whether that organization is a family or a school or a business. It's very stressful across all of that because none of us deal really well with ambiguity. No matter how much we might say in interviews we do, we don't. It is not a part of the human nature. So my hope is that this that we are living today is not the new normal. Now, in regard to best practices on leading teams to quality collaboration, you know, I think we've all learned a lot in doing that recently, just having gone through this. So one of the things that I'm going to say that I'm starting to think about is I headed into this period with doing daily meetings with my staff, because to me, that's how you respond to a crisis. You have to be right on top of everything every single day. And I thought, I'll do that a couple of weeks and then we'll be able to scale that back a little bit. We won't have to have daily meetings. I'm still having daily meetings every day. And I'm not sure that's going to change for me anytime soon. I think that daily meeting, while they were going an hour to an hour and a half, and now they're closer to 20 to 40 minutes, I think that daily touch base is something that we've come to think of as a new normal in our lives. The other thing that I will sort of draw out here is that while I hope this does not remain true when we come out the other side, while we're going through this COVID period, we have so many people who work for us, maybe not for us directly, but who work in our organizations, who provide our services, whether that's, our lunches when we drive up to a drive-up window or at the grocery store or whatever, who are also going through this great deal of ambiguity. Mm-hmm. I'm an empty nester. It's easy for me. But I'm on phone calls every day with people who have kids at home and who are trying to balance those demands of work and parenting and making it all happen at once. And I am generally amazed at how well they are doing it. And I hope that I could have done just as well if I'd been so challenged. But I guess one of the things that I kind of wanted to call out here, even though it's not direct point on the question, is that as we are dealing with quality collaboration about work from home, we also have to recognize that every once in a while, there's going to be a kid who comes and sits on mom's lap during the meeting. It's just going to happen. And we all need to welcome that and celebrate it and know that the healthier our families are, the healthier our work will be as well.
That's a fantastic point, Laura, about the families and the pets and the those types of distractions. Give people the grace and invite them in. Glenn, what's your perspective on quality collaboration and how much of this do you see being the new normal?
Okay, so here's the weird thing. So I mean, I've been managing remote teams for a long time, but I'll tell you, those were people just working in locations that weren't headquarters. And this is a lot different, right? I mean, to Laura's point, now all of a sudden, you got the dog is in the picture, and it's both good and bad, right? If you hear a dog, everybody's like, hey, show me your dog, whatever. And so it can be both fun and kind of distracting. We've got one employee that we joke, whenever he unmutes, you're going to hear a kid screaming in the background because he's got 3 at home and they're going nuts because they're climbing the walls. So it is much different than managing remote workers that just happen to be in a different part of the world or a different part of the country or state or whatever. Very early on, I had the good opportunity to get in on a webinar presented by Courts, which is a news service. And basically what they did is they had a bunch of people from their editorial staff that got on the call, and they are what I would call, quote unquote, work from home natives. They've never known an office in their life. And this was like really early on. This was like March 15th or something. And they were just sharing, hey, this is how we deal with it. And they weren't coming at it from the standpoint of, yeah, this is the way to do it. We love it. They were saying, there are times we'd like to be with our colleagues in an office, but this is just our reality. And, what I took away from them and what we've tried to focus on is that, hey, collaboration, however you do it, is key. I have not had the daily meetings that Laura's had. Because before this, our team was, we're on WebEx Teams constantly, right? So, I mean, it's constantly going back and forth among the IT team. We're encouraging our other organizations within the company to use that more and more. Video conferencing, which before was kind of something the executives used when they had their monthly, the different types of monthly board meetings, because we had 3 conference rooms set up like that. Now it's hard to get on a meeting that doesn't have video enabled. So that's, so having those collaboration tools in place is really critical. So I think depending on the type of organization you're having, it may be an organization where you're more comfortable having those daily stand-ups. In our case, I don't feel the need because the collaboration is just kind of constant. right? There's always something going on in Teams. We're always talking about everything. So, and it's a little bit different than some of the tools we've used in the past. You know, Skype is like primarily a, you know, kind of a one-to-one thing, but so we're seeing a whole lot more use of the collaboration tools. And as far as the new normal, I would never want to say that, you know, hey, the new normal is, you know, because we're always going to be worried about the next pandemic. But on the other hand, I think we take some lessons learned from this, that when people do have to be remote, we know better ways for them to work from home. I think that use of the collaboration tools by people that are, you know, even working from the various offices around our system are going to continue. So I think net, we're going to be collaborating better, and, you know, we'll be prepared. If the next one comes, we'll be better prepared for it.
Excellent. Thanks, Glenn. Jay, what's your perspective?
Yeah, you know, this is interesting. We have had a couple of teams working from Southern Indiana, headquartered in Indianapolis. So we've always tried to do the somewhat remote teams, but they're not really working from home. They're just remote. And so we were somewhat in that practice already. But one of the things we found is it's easier to manage when everybody's remote. So I think what we might see is there might be some teams that go fully remote, you know, and there are some teams that can't be, and versus trying to find a hybrid of, you know, all right, everybody can work from home 2 days a week, but you got to alternate so that somebody's in the office. I think that might start to change. And so I find that interesting. You know, I think best practices, the use of tools, everybody knows this, but I guess it's worth mentioning, you know, Slack, the use of Teams, document shares, you know, those things are critical. They're how we are being successful. Daily touch points were mentioned. That's huge. You know, I can tell you one thing that I think, at least it's changing at Goodwill for the better, and maybe other places, is early on, particularly, we almost had daily meetings as an executive staff. Before, we met once every 2 to 3 weeks for a few hours and spoke about very strategic things, but what's happening in the company now, today, this week, we didn't discuss those things really. Now we have a weekly meeting Monday morning for an hour, just like a lot of teams have. The executive staff is having that, and that's been very healthy, and I suspect that's going to continue. Additionally, senior leadership, so, you know, our 80 plus director and executive staff included, are meeting once a week on Fridays, and I think that's healthy, and I think that'll continue. I suspect in both cases those are going to be, you know, Zoom meetings. You know, and I don't think that's going to change. So, you know, I think there are some really healthy things that will come out of this. You know, I think the manage by walking around is going to start to be a thing of the past, and we're going to have to start learning to manage based on deliverables and expectations, and being a little bit more clear with what we expect people to deliver and when. And you know, it's going to be a shift. I also think you know, having fun, you got to figure out a way to do that. You know, I don't typically wear a jacket, and I no offense, I didn't really do it for this webinar. Today's dress up day. This is Spirit Week, right? So yesterday I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Day before that I was wearing an Indiana Jones hat, and tomorrow is IU Day. At least for my staff, it's IU Day. The rest of the company might be wearing other collegiate shirts, but you work for me, you're working for you. But that's tomorrow. So you got to find ways to have fun. Thursday, you know, a number of us met for nachos because that's what our cafeteria is served on Thursdays, and we've continued that. So we just have an hour where folks can join in and say hi, and if they have lunch, they can eat it. Otherwise, they can just talk about whatever. on Thursday. So I think figuring out ways to have fun remote is also critical.
That's a great point too, Jay, because it also builds that sense of community when you're doing those fun activities with the team. Those are some great ideas we can all use. So Doug, back to you. I think we're ready for the next poll question.
Yeah, we've got our last poll question here, and then we've got a question or two from the audience. Karen, if you could bring up number 4. Is your IT leadership team's remote management effectiveness improving? There's an opportunity to praise your team or to indict them. Wow, that's great news. Look at that. We've got 81% saying yes. I like that. Laura, how about, do you agree with all this?
I certainly hope that that is true. I know that we have gotten, at IPS, we've gotten much better at doing remote management, and I have been thrilled at how quickly my team was able to pivot. So at IPS, we have never supported students and families directly. We've always relied on having those calls come from the teacher, sometimes from the school secretary, sometimes from the principal. So there's always been an intermediary involved. Well, clearly that could not continue to happen in this day and age. And so if we are getting better at remote management for our customers, then that's a wonderful thing, and I hope that that is absolutely true. If what we're talking about here is remote management of our employees and that effectiveness, I hope that's true too. I don't know that we've been quite, at least at IPS, I don't know that we've been quite as conscious of making sure that our remote management of employees has been improving as we have had our focus on remote management for customers. But you know what? Sometimes good practices are just plain old good practices, whether you're talking about managing your customers or your employees, you're managing the human condition at the time. And so I think maybe some of it, wherever the focus is, it probably rubs off on the other area as well.
Thank you, Laura. Jeff Dodson.
Yeah, I would say we're at a tipping point right now where I think we've been relying on our standard collaboration and engagement practices. And my staff meeting today was the first time I heard kind of a call for, we need to be doing something different to make sure people are engaged, and how do we effectively reward people or do the casual, informal things when everybody's sitting in a different place. So I'd say I'm starting to see that shift, more empathy. We actually call the dogs and spouses and kids that step into the frame our coworkers. And sometimes we're asking, what are our coworkers doing today? So I see it moving. You know, they were pretty good at handling, like Glenn described, remote teams was normal, but the home situation requires more empathy and creativity, and I'm starting to see it.
Yeah, great point. We have got one question from the audience that I think is worth visiting. Nan Braun posed this one. Nan says that we are seeing organizations that spend upward of 10 million to get workers remote quickly. She's seen that multiple times. Can you, the panelists, speak to your scale of investment? And now that you're planning to bring people back into the office, what are the discussions around cost recovery for that investment? Anybody care to give that one a whirl?
Could you restate the question, please?
Yes, we are seeing organizations that spend upward of 10 million to get workers quickly to a remote position. Can you speak to your scale of investment? And now that you're planning to bring people back into the office, are there discussions, if any, around cost recovery on that?
I mean, I can take that. I mean, we had all the technology in place already. So I think we spent $400 for a printer for the CFO. So, you know, so basically for us, it was just making sure we use the tools we already had. So we didn't see anything, but of course, that's all from an IT perspective. So there could have been other things out in the business that were required. So I'm sure if you start looking at, you know, things like extra cleaning services and all those that were not strictly tagged into the IT budget, then there's lots of stuff. And I have not heard about cost recovery, no. But from an IT perspective, we spent basically nothing.
I can speak just a little bit to that if you would like. The investments that IPS has made have not been so much to an investment to pivot to the remote location as much as they've been an investment to be much more agile on being able to pivot as time goes on. So when we first pivoted to this first COVID shutdown, we put our focus on getting connectivity and devices out to our high school students. The focus was really on, we've got kids who are on the path to graduation, and we want to make sure they stay on the path of graduation. Because we were not a one-to-one district, we went with printed things for our youth, for our younger grades, K through 8, unless those 7th and 8th graders were taking high school credit classes. And in that case, they were treated the same as if they were in high school. Then the investments came to make sure that when we went back in the fall, that we would have a one-to-one environment. And as we have gone through that whole adjustment and planning and what do we need to do, one of the things that we all agreed to, not just the leadership team, this was a huge undertaking to get buy-in from everyone, that one-to-one and e-learning or remote learning or distance learning or whatever you want to call it is not just about a pivot to a snow day. It's not just about a pivot to a pandemic or some other crisis. That technology supported learning can happen in the classroom, and it makes learning and teaching better in the classroom, and it makes us more flexible for a snow day or a pandemic or for whatever else. So for us, we believe that the investments that we are making in technology today in order to redefine our business are going to definitely produce outcomes in the future, whether we're in the classroom or we're teaching remotely and learning from home.
Has cost recovery come up in any of your circumstances on work from home? I haven't heard a word about it from the people I've talked to.
I would say you might be at United. The investment was massive to move tens of thousands of people home between mobility solutions and increasing VPN bandwidth. So I see the company leveraging that investment to permanently shift. And you could say the cost recovery is divesting real estate.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. All right, I appreciate all of your time. We've got a couple of events coming up on next Tuesday that we want to talk about. Oh, almost forgot. If any of you who are listening are in between opportunities, Jeff Tunn and I are perfectly willing to help you and to use our networks to help you find your next gig. So Here is contact information for both Jeff and for me. Please reach out to us if you're on the hunt. Jeff, do you want to talk about Tuesday's CIO Network event?
Yes, so next Tuesday night, the Indy CIO Network, we typically have dinner events, so we'll have a virtual event rather than a dinner event. It's Tuesday, May 12th from 5:30 to 8:30. It's being hosted by Beltec Logics, and we're going to have a keynote from IndyCar driver Pippa Mann, as well as a panel discussion from a group of panelists. We're going to be talking about accelerating change and driving diversity and inclusion in our organization. So it's a fantastic event. We've invited our sister organization, Women in High Tech, to join us, as well as the IT leaders. So hopefully we'll have a great group of folks listening in on what promises to be a fantastic discussion.
Thanks, Jeff. And the normal IT leaders bi-monthly peer group, who many of you here on the panel have spoken at or are going to speak at, that is actually next Tuesday as well. And it looks like I misspelled bi-monthly. May 12th, 8 to 9:30 a.m. Oh my gosh, 2 typos in one. That's 8 to 9:30 a.m. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 8 to 9:30 a.m. Jamie Lee, former CIO of Wabash National, will be speaking on a growth mindset. And Myra Coca, founder of Iron Strike and former Lilly employee, is going to be talking about corporate communications in times like these. So both ought to be great topics. Many of you know Jamie. I'm really looking forward to both presentations. This event and all the future events are available at itleaders.org/Indianapolis. And like you said, not to let a good pandemic go to waste, we are planning a June 16th business continuity, a practical business continuity planning workshop that's not on the calendar quite yet, but that's June 16th, that's going to happen in the morning. And it looks like we'll have a couple of presenters on that. I've told a lot of people, nobody I know here in Indy, in the IT world, activated their DR plan for COVID. Every single company I know who had a business continuity plan activated it for COVID. So a lot of them were measuring the value of their business continuity plan by weight rather than by effectiveness. And I think that thinking is changing now. So that's what we'll be talking about on June 16th. Any final comments from the panelists? Thank you very much for coming back a second time and sharing with the group. I know the group has expressed a great deal of appreciation. I've gotten so much positive feedback. This event will be recorded, or is being recorded, and will be, the link will be distributed on the follow-up email. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you guys very much.